This is a clip from the Canon podcast. To hear the full episode and get access to exclusive benefits, head over to patreon.com/the Canon pod and sign up for just £3 a month.
Yeah, contracts at Arsenal, it's almost like Arsenal on a spree right now of just giving players new contracts. Ramsdale sorted out. You've got obviously Saka sorted out. Martinelli sorted out. Previously Gabriel Magalhaes. Next up, you've got Saliba and Odegaard up. Richard Garlick is a guy behind the scenes that not many people talk about. It's often Edu and it's often Arteta. These are the guys in charge of it. They're in charge of the transfers. And when it goes right, it's their, it's up to them. When it goes wrong, it's up to them as well. Let's talk about Richard Garlick. Alex, talk to me about man like Garlick.
It's tricky when we approach executives because obviously his role, I believe, is Director of Football Operations. I believe that's his official title. That is a vague vague title. It could mean a number of things and will mean different things at different clubs. I think what he's brought is obviously the experience in the Premier League. I believe he was at West Brom before. Clearly, there is there's a trickiness in it associating too much to one person, to Edu or whatever. But since he's come in, let's say what we've seen, and ultimately there is a huge amount of responsibility for this. We've seen a lot more forward thinking. We've seen a lot more clear planning. We've seen a lot more. It feels like we've seen a lot less leaks and using the media in a different way. And I think something that I was frustrated with probably before he came in was around the Saliba thing. I think when he was getting loaned out, I found really frustrating that Arsenal weren't controlling the narrative, because it's like, if you like this player, just say something to the media. Arsenal have a plan for Saliba. He's just going out on loan, but there was all this thing. He's going out on loan. Oh my God, Arsenal are going to use him, whatever. And there was silence from the club. And I think someone like Richard Garlick's come in and said, I now don't think that would happen. I think it would just be a case of maybe he'd say something to Ornstein. I imagine Richard is the person probably controlling how we use the media and stuff like that. And when it comes to things like the Smith Rowe debacle, I think he understands that being able to use the current media space to your advantage is something that can be really good for a club. And it's something that Man City do. There's rarely actually conversations around Man City. There's rarely, and I know they're always the benchmark, but they are. There's rarely conversations. There's rarely speculation. There's rarely, rumours about, discontent in the boardroom. There's rarely, and I'm sure those things go on, by the way. It's human relationships. People fall out. It happens. But someone at Man City, and now I think a Richard Garlick at Arsenal, have managed to stop the leaks. We had that thing about Mikel saying, I'm going to destroy the leak or whatever. But I think Richard has come in, and since then there's felt like a more stable environment, a more calm environment, a more planned environment, and an environment where, we saw him in All or Nothing working a bit. It feels like someone who has a very common sense approach, a very just, look, this is, clearly this player has a period to go by. Can we pay this person off with a viewpoint in the future that actually this is going to be more beneficial for us long term rather than doing those short term Socrates type deals? It's difficult to know how much credit or blame to associate with anyone at a football club, because you don't know exactly their roles and exactly what was their decision and what wasn't. You can only go off reports. But all we can say is, since he's come in, there feels like on the contract side of things, on the media side of things, on the club culture side of things as well, in terms of the engagement with fans and in terms of improving the sort of relationship there, things have improved. And if someone is responsible, which it sounds like Richard Garlick is, for a lot of that, then we do have to give him credit, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And George, let's talk about Richard Garlick in the sense of what does he do for Arsenal? And, it's a very easy thing to call him Director of Football Operations, but what does that mean if you're an Arsenal fan?
Well, I think he's on the ground zero floor in terms of negotiations, right? Like, for me, when people look at Edu, there's a lot of jokes that fly around in terms of the barbecues and whatnot, but realistically, Edu, he is a smiling face in a sense. He does participate in negotiations, but he brings people to the table. And he is somebody that, in a sense, is almost how I view as the secretary that is patching through phone numbers, and he will be involved. But Richard Garlick is the expert on the ground. He is somebody that was specializing in sports law. And again, for a little bit of background, he was the director of football at West Brom before then moving to the Premier League, where he was hired as the football operations head and director of football of the Premier League in 2018. And that's where we poached him from. And so when you start to look at the recruitment, it was a very considered appointment from Arsenal. And when you look at the amount of domestic recruits and us maximizing our foothold in the domestic market, and then you look at Declan Rice, of course, making it the project of your face. Again, these are kind of things that kind of line up with somebody that must have background in the domestic game, somebody that must be able to create deals, understand what it's like to find talents within your own league, and then maximize that kind of market. And so when you look at it, I think Richard Garlick, again, he's somebody that will actually be the one negotiating those deals when you talk of base payments, add-ons, to break down what a transfer is, right? A transfer is you have this base payment that you could say, let's say it's £50 million. Then you've got add-ons, right? And add-ons can be specific to amount of appearances in the Champions League, general appearances, goal-related bonuses, these things. There's a lot of moving parts. And those base fees that you even see are then split up into payments, like how much is an upfront payment you're paying to the club? How much is amortized over the length of the contract? These are all parts of negotiations, and that's really what Richard Garlick's role is as a sports law specialist. He is the one that is kind of understanding where can we make these clauses, how can we include maybe sell-on clauses from an Arsenal perspective. This is something new that Richard Garlick has really introduced kind of into our sports dealings, where even youngsters that have now left, we included sell-on clauses, Matteo Guendouzi. When you're talking about Christian Bielik, again, these are some deals in the past. These come in to include these. And of course, the sell-on percentages, where if they were to be moved on, like a Mavropanos, he is more flexible in his deals in terms of including if they're to buy you in the future, Arsenal can get a small fee of a certain percentage that they may negotiate. So these are things that I think that Richard Garlick has improved in terms of our negotiating, that have been a little bit more creative, that have been a little bit more flexible. And I even just look at Bukayo Saka's contract, guys, in terms of the compromise. Deals in the past, when we talk about Husfami and our contract negotiators of the past, I'm not confident that when agents come to demand a release clause that either they don't pay and we lose the player, or that they agree, listen, let's remove the release clause, but I will pay you an extortionate amount that I know I can't afford, but just to get the deal done. And it seemed like it was a one or done approach in that sense. Richard Garlick is a lot more of a creative operator for me. He's finding a lot more creative ways to keep our salary cap. And I do think we can't talk about Richard Garlick without kind of appreciating kind of Dick Law and kind of, the difference between those two. And I really see a lot of similarities in a sense when you start to look at some of these dealings. Of course, when we look at kind of our executive board in general, Tim Lewis is somebody that, you can't skip over. For me, he's the direct line to the KSE ownership, and he says, listen, Richard Garlick, this is the highest you can go. I will tell you, you can play within whatever playground you want. You organize the deals. However, when it reaches this particular point of no breaking, this is where I step in and I tell you how high you can go. And I think that chemistry between the three is how we kind of operate, right? And look, Edu is in theory the smooth talker in terms of saying, listen, come around my house, we'll organize a meeting. And then I think, Richard Garlick's the one that made the meal. And then, maybe, Tim Lewis is the guy that, set the budget for the shopping list. That's kind of just how I view it in terms of an analogy.
It is hilarious, though.
Also,
right?
just wanted to add on very quickly something that I think that Garlick has added in. So many cooking metaphors we could do there. But something that he's added is, and it's something James Benge pointed out. I think it's a brilliant point. Martinelli first joined in 2019. He then signed an improved contract in 2020. Right? Mm-hmm. Was it 2018? 2019 he joined. Then he signed an improved contract in 2020. Then he signed a new contract in 2023. That's a lot of contracts in a period of time. What that is it's rewarding players for good performance, which is something we didn't do before. What we used to do is we used to basically wait until it was too late, sign someone up for a fee for something that they weren't going to do in the future, like an Ozil. So, putting him on money for something that, for a performance level that he wasn't going to be able to reach in terms of age profile, in terms of that sort of stuff. We're now rewarding players. So it's a place where people come and they know if I perform well, I can get an improved deal here. So, it's that as well. And Tim Lewis, I do want to shout out as well, because whatever they're doing, the conversations they're having are working.
Mm. And, Arsenal, as you can say, are being proactive now. It isn't about waiting. It's about actually making the action and making things happen. And Arsenal will need to be proactive again in this window, not just in player sales, but how do they loan players again? Now, of course, you've got the returning loanees and following Balogun, Charlie Patino, Marcelo Flores. There's quite a few names there. But are there any Arsenal players that you believe may be a part of the current Arsenal first team squad that need to be loaned out? I know you've, of course, had Tavares go out on loan, Sambi Lokonga. George, what Arsenal players, if there was one, that you believe maybe needs a loan spell away from the Emirates?
Thanks for checking out the Canon Podcast. To get full episodes and access to exclusive benefits, head over to patreon.com/the Canon Pod and sign up for just £3 a month.